or my own whatever I did with Frank. Okay, so Kosky says, what do you mean your earphones? Paul McCartney had with my earphones. He said, what do you mean your earphones? I don't understand. And Zappa goes, I mean, that's the way it looked like me in the studio. I really shit my pants when I saw it. I've never met them. It was a bizarre coincidence. And like him conducting the orchestra on the recent album Sgt. Pepper, I don't know how much that would amount to because the orchestra is used as an effect. And like him conducting the orchestra, so he's saying they used the orchestra in Sgt. Pepper, but he didn't know how much that would amount to something. I'm not sure what he means. I don't know how much that would amount to.
Zappa.
What?
He was imitating Zappa, McCartney.
Yeah, did you say imitating?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. They. Now that's where Frank was the hidden ground, and the Beatles were going to become pretty avant-garde within their world, their pop world. So they tuned in that leading edge energies, and then they became like Frank. It's like Bob Marshall sounding like me when he's on the radio. They become you because you've got the frequency. They have to be. You actually get a monopoly on the hidden ground of the leading edge. And so if you walk into get close to where Frank or me is, you have to become like me, right? We dominate that bleeding edge zone. So
that's interesting that the connection of Paul McCartney and Frank, because he already had connection with Ringo later with Ringo with the 200 Motels. Yeah, and then John Lennon and Yoko. So that's interesting. He was the ground for them. I mean,
right. Well, let me give you a couple of points.
I wonder if
George would be the only one that I don't know of. I never heard of him being with Frank, but he was an emotional, meditating, wimpy guy. He was a softie. He wouldn't. I don't think he would go for Frank's kind of music. But who knows? But George was always, in a position of feeling bad because they wouldn't put his songs out. He was left out. Now, Ion says the real smart Beatle was Ringo Starr. While Ion says, and I don't know if this is true, he said, while John and Paul and George are arguing over song credits or this and that, Ringo was the only one around talking to the fucking record executives and signing the contracts. He actually made some really smart signings, and so he's the only one who works with Frank. What?
In Mexico, there is a joke. They say Ringo was in the band because he tried the drugs before the Beatles.
They say he was in the band because
he was used to try the drugs before the real Beatles.
No, I get that. What's the first part? He was in the band. I'm not getting it. You got to make it clear. What are you saying?
He was used to try the drugs before the Beatles.
Well, who used them?
Ringo was like the test person.
Oh, okay. It's a joke in Mexico that Ringo's the dumb guy because he got brain damage from the drugs.
No. He was used as
he was used to the drugs.
In the mind.
Is she saying, Bert, that Ringo was smart and he was used to the drugs?
No, she's saying that the joke is that like Ringo was like canary, the test.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
The test for the drugs.
Yeah, he got brain damaged. Because he was used early. He was the first canary. He died in the mine. Is that what you're saying?
It's true.
Yes, it's true. It's not a joke. Mexicans didn't know. Just because Ringo looks like a Mexican, the Mexicans couldn't see the facts. They had to make it into a joke because it was too humiliating. Because he looks like a fucking Mexican dwarf. But look, here's the thing. Ringo's the coolest guy because he hangs out with Frank, does a movie with him, and he doesn't have any battles with Frank. John and Yoko rip off the recording, the Fillmore East June 71 recording. They cause a problem with Frank. Paul McCartney, Frank sees this image, And then a little while later, when We're Only for the Money's coming out, he calls up, or he gets a call from them. Let me see. There's a phone call between him and Paul McCartney. I don't know what initiated. He's calling up and asking if McCartney accepts the parody that Frank's We're Only for the Money was doing of Sgt. Pepper's. And McCartney said, you have to talk to my manager. And Zappa said, well, why do I talk to my manager? I'm talking to you. Your manager's supposed to do what you say. And McCartney was a bit flustered, and it wasn't a good conversation. And so it came back that Frank wasn't allowed to satirize it. He had to take the satirical part and make it the inside of the gatefold and have a plainer outer side that no one could see. So Paul McCartney suppressed Frank's creativity and after imitating him. So, and then John, so they all, only Ringo made it with Frank. So what's our point? Okay, so I'm telling you about a couple of incidents. What were we illustrating? I had a couple of facts. Oh, yeah. So John Lennon gets interviewed. John Lennon in 1971 gets interviewed by Jan Wenner for the Rolling Stone official interview, and it's released as a book. In the book, John Lennon's talking about how terrible it was being a Beatle, going around and having to socialize with mayors of towns. He says, I would rather have been Frank Zappa. That's what he says. He said, I'd rather have been Frank.
Oh, wow.
So he says that right in this interview. Put that in when you do the history of the 60s and 70s in these virtual history bullshit documentaries. Put that fucking quote up there, instead of just saying the Beatle cliches. But okay, so so Lennon said that. McCartney stopped the album. What were we talking about? Leading edge, getting into the leading edge.
Paul McCartney was imitating Frank Zappa as the conductor.
Right, with the headphones. And there might have been another fact. Maybe that's enough for now. It might come up later, but okay. So I'm trying to say that they all interacted with Frank. Ringo did the best. And there's an article in Newsweek magazine in December '69, an article on Beefheart, and Beefheart celebrating he put down the Beatles. He made a song called Beatle Bones, Smokin' Stones. So there was, if you think of a British invasion, according to LaRouche, Edgar Allan Poe was against Charles Dickens. They represented British intelligence versus American intelligence. Then LaRouche is against turning taxes himself. So in the pop culture, it was Frank versus John Lennon. It was the Lancaster. You could have Lancaster, California, is where Beefheart and Frank were in high school for a couple of years. They're against the York, British house. York. Remember the War of the Roses between the House of York and the House of Lancaster in British history? About 1400 A.D. You have Lancaster versus York right there in pop culture between the Beatles and those guys. Remember, he had to kick Mick Jagger out of his home because Mick Jagger lit up a joint right there in Zappa's house, and Zappa had to be careful and he didn't get busted. So it's York versus Lancaster. And remember, he goes to the Duke. He has Francesco Zappa is interacting with the Duke of York. I never had a proof of my Lancaster-York thing until now. I just realized it. Duke of York, right? So the York, it's like Frank is like doing doo-wop, and embedded in these simple, ridiculous, cosmic greed spider lady lyrics is historical Finneganese, historical reference points. The Duke of York versus the House of Lancaster.
It's all about the eye against the ear.
The ear, yes. And Frank doesn't have to, it's like language is doing its own poetic prose, satire, whatever, epic, regardless of what humans think they're doing. The language is doing it. And that's what Ian said. They could show us the fourth ring in Phineas Wake that Joyce wasn't aware of. But the language was. Okay, so there was a couple other interesting little facts. I haven't got them right now. So, Kofsky So Frank says, I don't know how much that would amount to because the orchestra's used in the... Oh, so he's saying McCartney is seen conducting an orchestra, but he's saying it's not a huge part of the Sgt. Pepper album. It's just used as an effect. So Kosky says, have you listened to that album carefully? Zappa says, yes. Kosky, do you think there's any similarity between Lovely Rita Meter Maid and certain parts of Help I'm a Rock? So you have the Beatles song, Meter Maid, and Help I'm a Rock on Freak Out. Zappa says, the way they're doing huffa puffa in the background? He asks Kosky, is that what you're referring to? And then he answers it. Zappa answers, yes, I do, as a matter of fact. There's also a coincidence in the use of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band as a reprise in the way we do America Drinks and Goes Home on Absolutely Free. So there is slight influences going on there. Tarkovsky says, was your album released at the time that they were preparing Sgt. Pepper? Zappa says, do you know when Absolutely Free was recorded? It was recorded before Thanksgiving last November, before we came to New York. So yes, Absolutely Free was recorded in 1966. So let's look up the dates for Absolutely Free. Sgt. Pepper's. Still working on it.
13.
Yeah, that's the other one I do. 13.
The soundtrack to keep away.
Hey, look at this. Oh. Sgt. Pepper was recorded November 24th, 66 to 21st April 67. And he says that they recorded it before Thanksgiving. So that means, now, they recorded Sgt. Pepper over a 6-month period, so they definitely would have heard Zappa stuff in that 6-month period.
Yes. Because
Frank is looking like a conductor in February 67. That's a couple months before April 67, so that Lennon, McCartney would have seen that picture in February, March, I assume. So then Kosky says, what kept it from being released earlier? Was it the censorship problem? Frank says yes. Kosky, do you think that the Beatles would have had access to that? Zappa says, I don't know. Yes, it's possible. Because rumors in the industry have a tendency to go very fast. And on the Rolling Stones album called Between the Buttons, he doesn't say the word called, on the Rolling Stones album, Between the Buttons, they've got that camp song, Something Happened to Me Yesterday. But we recorded ours before theirs, though theirs was released before ours. So I don't know which album the camp thing is on, Lumpy Gravy or One Else for the Money. Or Absolutely Free, I don't know. I don't know that part. Kosky says, just from the grapevine, I know that there are several English groups like the Yardbirds and Eric Burdens that seem to be intrigued by what you're doing. Yes, Gomelski introduced the Yardbirds to Zappa in 66 or so, maybe even 65 on their first tour. He discovered Frank and introduced the band to them. That's, Eric Burden and those guys. So Eric Clapton. But Eric Clapton may not have been in the Yardbirds when they toured. I'm not sure. He dropped out. So it says, so he, from his own gossip level, Kosky knows that the Yardbirds and Eric Burden are intrigued by that. And Eric Burden goes and hangs out with Frank. Can you think of any other English groups or American groups, for that matter, that have made the mother's influence explicit? Zappa says, no, but let me tell you how far it's gone with the Animals. That's Eric Burden. First of all, it's common knowledge in the industry that the way it was explained to me, and this is not my opinion of what they've done till now, it was explained to me that they were the typical non-creative rock and roll group who have made a success performing material that was not necessarily original and which was not written by any member of the group. Kosky then said, they've said that. Eric Burden has said that they've had great problems writing their own material. Zappa then says, okay, so I had an experience arranging some stuff for them. And I found not only were they not particularly original, but were, one, hung up in that R&B bag, which is deadening when you get little white boys trying to be little black boys, screaming the blues and being funky and all. That's shitty. Kosky says, that's Frank as a purist from the 50s, Yeah. Kosky, the best thing about the Rolling Stones was that the best thing about the Rolling Stones was that they didn't do that very long. The little white boys recording, trying to be little black boys. Zappa says, yeah, but when they did it, it was funky. So he's putting it down. Yeah, remember they satirized Beetle Bones and Smoking Stones, so they put down the Stones, I guess. Remember he knew nothing about Keith Richards in that guitar quote. Best thing about the Rolling Stones is they didn't do that very long. Yeah, but when they did it, it was funky. It wasn't necessarily colored sounding blues, but it was really funky. Kosky says, yes, British working class funk. Zappa says, and it was valid for that, except when they tried to do too much Chuck Berry. Now, after Eric Burden went to a party at my place, I don't know what happened in his head. I believe he was a little bit psychedelically jacked up that evening, or the 2 nights that he spent over at my place. Are you laughing? Did I hear you laughing? Yeah. Jacked up psychedelically. It must have been something, because now there's this album that they recorded about a month or two ago with Tom Wilson in Los Angeles. Their new group is psychedelic. One of their songs is 7 minutes long. It's a poem about the Black Plague, and it's accompanied by tape-recorded sounds of a monastery. They've got another song about San Francisco policemen. Tom Wilson said they went into the studio and played Susie Cream Cheese note for note. I mean, the one on the Freakout album. Played Return of the Son of Monster Magnet. They're playing fucking Frank stuff in the studio. Note for note.
The cover.
That's why they're going to call it the Zappa era when all the facts come out. He was the hidden ground for everything. So if that's the kind of stuff, they're what?
Yes, that's what they were listening to.
Right, because they knew that was the hidden ground. That was what was attracting their minds. So because it had an edge of creativity that no one could foresee. So if that's the kind of Zappa says, so if that's the kind of stuff they're practicing, if they use that album as point zero, meaning Freakout as point zero to start from, that's dynamite, man. If every group in the industry would do that, and I would love to see them do it, the whole complexion of the music would change in a hurry. And it would be very gratifying to hear that weirdness on the radio coming from people other than us. He's actually he wants them to rip him off. Because he's trying to have a musical revolution.
Maybe that's the real marking of the Bob era, because it's the frequency time, the freak out.
Yes.
The new frequency.
And that period, 66 is when Carol and I get together. I think we were the hidden ground beneath the hidden ground, beneath the hidden ground, on top of the ground, paring our fingernails indifferently. But yeah, that was a big year for me and Carol in 66. Frank says later he would say he was frozen in 1966. He's still stuck there. Well, that's because I kept coming around re-hypnotizing him to stay in 66. If you're going to be a Rai, you have to do it before January 67 when Rai returned to Plane of Essence. You know, when Doobie died, Ralph Doobie died, that was it. January 22nd, 1967. So if you wanted to be creative, you had to go back a few months, stay there. Else you'd get wiped out by the bliss of no more Rai. Now, that's never been said in Zappa commentary before. Even Stockhausen would freak out if he heard this.
That's how it all began.
Yes. The whole world was celebrating Bob and Carolyn getting together. When Bob and Carolyn got together, everybody, Leonardo da Vinci, everybody, you know how Ian sometimes said, we are rejoicing. Remember Ian would say that occasionally? We are rejoicing. Well, it was so rejoiceful they had a be-in. Was it in January 67? They had a be-in in January 67. The whole fucking world turned into love maniacs all through 67. Nobody knows where it came from and where it disappeared to. Well, you're listening to the Hidden Ground right here.
That's the summer of love.
Yes, the summer of Bob and Connie love. It's like Tristram and Shandy, Tristram and Isa? What the fuck is it? Tristram and Isolde, the famous medieval story that Phineas Wake starts off with. The great love story. We are the greatest love story.
Tristan und Isolde.
You're muffling. Clean out your mic. Wipe the spittle out of your microphone. Empty your saxophone. So what do you say? Yeah, I should have said, Bob. He used to say,
"Can you hear me?"
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah, you're coming through loudly and clearly from the other world. But like that.
Tristan
Okay, what'd you say?
Und Tristan und Isolde.
Yes,
Those
Tristan und. That's the German. Tristan und Isolde. Right. T-N-I. Can we get Bob and Connie out of T and I? Tristan and Isolde. What? T-U-I. Ralph Eloy 2. Well, T-U-I. Tristan und Isolde. T-U-I. That's one of the four forces. Right? Eloy 2 Lofty. 2. Yes, we were archetypal forces. He was Rai with Isis, affecting 2, Tristan and Isolde, and Lofty. Well, that took another 30 years before they blew up the 911, and that was Lofty. Remember this Saudi guy, the terrorist named Lofty? That was a delay. But the I would say that. He says to me, Bob, we're non-physical. How come you can hear us? If we're non-physical, how come you can hear us? And you're saying the same thing. If you're in a parallel world, how come we can hear you, Roxy? And we do hear you. Okay, let's carry on. This is a fantastic interview, man. It's new discoveries. Okay, where are we? So Frank is saying, man, if every group in the industry would imitate us, and I would love to see them do it, the whole complexion of the music would change in a hurry, and it would be very gratifying to hear that weirdness on the radio coming from people other than us. And Koski says, do you have any indication that your music is catching on in industry? Zappa says, well, I noticed that every time we work with another act, we usually accompany somebody who's a star in quotes. Whenever the star group is on and we've played together on a couple of sets, the next time we hear them, they're playing something that sounds like something we do. I realized that from the first time we worked with the Blues Project, that's Paul Butterfield, till the next time we saw them. They were doing songs with time changes in them, but they were stopping in between, so they counted off and started again. They still hadn't gotten down to the point where they could actually bring themselves to actually jump in the air and land on the first beat of the first bar. And other groups, we just noticed that experimental things are creeping into their bag. And although the people who are trying these things believe what they're doing is original and all that, I can't help but feel that we had something to do with motivating them to try something more unusual than they might have if they hadn't heard the Freakout album or heard that somebody was doing something weird. When you're writing a song, as most of the groups do, it's a cooperative effort. They all get together. You have certain alternatives that you can do in putting that song together. At a certain point in the arranging of the tune, you can decide whether or not the bridge is going to be a simple bridge or if it's going to be a bit weird. Most of the time now, the kids are choosing something that might be unique. A time signature change, a weird chord here and there, a suspension. You know, it's happening. Their idea of what music is broadening. It's happening. Their idea of what music is broadening. Do you hear this in the San Francisco groups, too? Zappa says, San Francisco still seems to be either hung up on modality, plastic yardbird imitations, or R&B. I got soul, baby, even though I'm Jewish. That's what he says. I got soul, baby, even though I'm Jewish. Kofsky says, in what category would you fit the Jefferson Airplane? Well, they started out as being modal city. What's that mean? Doing modes? Is that a musical term? Modal? Modal, okay. They start out as being modal city. I liked the stuff on the first album more than the second. As a matter of fact, they asked me to produce their third album. I couldn't do it because I couldn't leave the Garrick Theater in New York just to go out there and do it, which means a loss of a lot of money.
This is not a valid menu option.
Yeah, we know that. Kofsky, have you produced any albums yet? Zappa goes, for other people? I've produced singles for other people, and I'm getting ready to produce an album of a group called the Auto Salvage, which is very promising. Koski, I never heard of that album. I don't think it went far. Koski, have there been any singles released by the Mothers? Zappa says 3. What happened to them? Well, How Could I Be Such a Fool, which was released as our first single, sold 4,000 in Detroit. Imagine us on the radio selling records in Detroit. Koski, what was the B-side? The B-side was It Can't Happen Here. Then Frank starts laughing. I mean, I couldn't go too straight, so you made a single have a weird song on it. Then came the Watts Riot song, Trouble Coming Every Day, in a scaled-down version with Who Are the Brain Police on the other side. If the DJ put that thing on to test, if they ever got around to checking it over, forget it. So he knew his singles wouldn't get played. How well did they sell? Did it do anything? Zappa says, a record doesn't sell unless it gets on the radio. Then the third single was, quote, There's a Big Dilemma About My Big Leg Emma, with Why Don't You Do Me Right on the other side. That hasn't been put out, has it? Yes, it has. I'll give you a copy of it. No, I meant on an album. No, fortunately, and I hope it never is. He did put There's a Big Dilemma About Big Leg Emma 10 years later on an album. No, fortunately, and I hope it never is, because it was a straight commercial attempt to just go in with a piece of absolute shit for a market that is based on shit. It was an experiment. There's this pile of shit. There it is. So, a straight commercial attempt. I guess he was trying to be commercial, but he did it. You know, Big Leg Emma and Why Don't You Do Me Right, they're just straightforward nonsense blues or something. He's not proud of them. But he says, we were just trying to get some money, I guess. Just create some shit for a market that is based on shit. And then Koski says, how did it work? And Zappa says, not too well. He couldn't compromise. He could have made a nice, pleasant song. You know what I mean? With nothing satire in it. But he couldn't bring himself to do it. Okay, Koski says, because it didn't do too well, he goes, that's encouraging in a way. It shows that you can't merchandise straight shit. Shows that you can't merchandise straight shit. Zappa says, well, we could. I have another way. There's different categories of straight shit. That was straight shit jug band, okay? The other side was straight shit R&B with a little humor thrown in. Maybe people were offended by the fact that I did a takeoff on Wild Thing, or Sit Down, I Think I Love You, or something like that. Now, the next single that we're going to put out is a beautiful song, and it's done with a beautiful arrangement. It's got some lyrics that will go directly to the consciousness level of the 13-year-old girl. That's Debbie. We heard about Debbie. It's a song about a 13-year-old girl who has parents that don't understand her, who gets her rocks off by listening to her favorite singers on the radio and digging their picture on the wall and living in that putrid world that they invent for themselves, locked away in their bedrooms. It's a song that takes the attitude, quote, we know where you're at, and if you need any assistance, just give us a buzz, unquote. It's not like we say, come to us, but just by saying that we know what you're doing in your bedroom, which is more than anybody else has said so far, at least we came out and said it. And I think it'll be a winner. How long is it? It's about 2 minutes. Well, that didn't work, as far as I know. Okay, and then Koski says, how long is this interview? Maybe we should stop.
It's very interesting.
All right, well, it's only a couple more pages, so maybe we will finish it. It's about 2 minutes. Koski says, it seems inconceivable that 5 years, 3 years, maybe 2 years ago, that you could put out 2 albums like the 2 you've put out, that the record companies would be convinced that there was any market for that material. Do you agree with that assessment? And if you do, what do you think has caused the change? First of all, Zappa says, the market that we reach always existed, but the manner in which we reached that market was carefully planned. And the way we were presented to the record company was carefully planned. We were still turned down by every major company, which was best, because we wound up with Tom Wilson. I think that was a great advantage. He's been responsible, having been producing a long time, for most major weirdnesses in music. He was the first man to record Cecil Taylor, and he recorded Dylan and Simon and Garfunkel. He was the one that made Dylan go rock and roll. Dylan's Subterranean Homesick Blues was a monster record. I heard that thing and I was jumping all over the car. And then when I heard the one after that, Like a Rolling Stone, I wanted to quit the music business because I felt, quote, if this wins and it does what it's supposed to do, I don't need to do anything else, unquote. But it didn't do anything. It sold, but nobody responded to it the way that they should have. They should have listened to that and said, hey, that record got on the radio. Now, wait a minute. We've got a chance to say something, you know. The radio is for us to use as a weapon. So he was always trying to get people to loosen up and change the radio world. And they should have got that from Dylan's Like a Rolling Stone. So he says, it didn't happen right away, and I was a little disappointed. I figured, well, shit, maybe it needs a little reinforcing. And that's their well-planned, one of their levels of well-planned. So just as he in the Reuben Jets scenario, Uncle Meat gets Reuben Jets to play 50 songs in 1969 to get people to go back to 50s. Frank wanted people to go back to Like a Rolling Stone, 1965, and pick up what didn't happen in 65 with Homesick Blues and Like a Rolling Stone. Okay, so Frank says maybe we could give a little reinforcing. Kofsky says obviously it does, because people respond to those things, and yet they can't immediately go beyond just responding emotionally and internally. They can't go and do something at once. And then Zappa says you've got to make them involve themselves. Kofsky says exactly. There was a very poignant thing I read. I believe it was Mary McCarthy writing about Vietnam in the New York Review, seeing the soldiers there. They're all 19 years old, singing Blowing in the Wind and Where Have All the Flowers Gone, and then going out and killing the gooks, kill for peace. So obviously just identifying with the message, while certainly a step forward, is not sufficient. Zappa says, listen, we had 3 Marines in full dress uniform on stage one night with us. What did you do then? Zappa says, I'll tell you the story. I don't want to go through that. He gets the Marines up there, and they're yelling, eat the apple, fuck the corp. I don't know. You guys know that story? It's a long thing. Let's bypass it. It's a famous story. The Marines get up there and act out quite violently and scared. They knife up the dolls and everything, because he said, do what you do in Vietnam, and scared the audience. So, and he goes, so Zappa, he does the whole story, then he goes, full dress blues, man. They just burned 12 flags. Kofsky goes, court-martial. Zappa goes, right, court-martial city, all right. So then we took an intermission, and they stuck around. I said, do you guys know? He's like, do you guys know you're doing stuff that could get you in trouble? And they go, he says, I don't care. They say, somebody says, one of them, I don't care, man. They can only get you once. And I said, okay, go back on. I told Gail to get the doll. This is the first time we ever used the doll. We had this doll that somebody gave us. It was really shitty, big plastic doll. Bring it down. And I say, quote, hey, ladies and gentlemen, the guys are going to sing Everybody Must Get Stoned, unquote. They go through all that shit, and I says, now we're going to have basic training. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a gook baby, and the Marines are going to mutilate it before your very eyes. Kill it. So Frank tossed it to them. They ripped the arms off, beat it up, stomped on it, and just completely tore the doll apart. After they're all done, the music got real quiet. The lights went down, and I held it by the hair and showed the audience all the damaged parts of the doll's body, pretending. There was one guy in the front row, a Negro cat, just come back from Vietnam. He was crying. It was awful. And I had the show there. Kofsky says, I guess you did. Zappa goes, yeah, thank you, goodbye. It was an atrocity. It was the most, and Kofsky says, that sounds like Lenny Bruce at the London Palladium, that thing he does with the entertainer. A leper on the Art Baker show. You asked for it? An arm. Zappa goes, oh, no. Or, oh, I don't know what that means. Oh, no, he's shocked by Lenny, or he's saying no. Oh, yes, that's his thing he does on cheapness. No. Beat back the bar. No. Remember? He's complaining about the strings holding up the dummy monster. Beat it back. Yeah. I think that's what Frank's doing there. Oh, no. Kofsky says, who says that on the Absolutely Free album? You say that, right? Zappa says, right. And then he does it. Oh, no. Unless it's said some other way. I don't know how it's said. Kofsky, you seem to be very entranced with that phrase on Absolutely Free. Zappa says, maybe it's the one where they go, oh, no. I don't know. They got me. Zappa, well, that was a phase I was in. Also, so him going, oh, no, was a phase. Not a phrase. It was a phase. Also, I had an idea of the commercial value of any phrase repeated in that context. In other words, the catchphrase of that album, that's the Susie Cream Cheese of that album. So, Susie Cream Cheese is the motif repeated in Freak Out. The oh no, whatever it is on Absolutely Free as a repeat motif. And he's admitting, he's trying to make a brainwash people. Did you get that? He's trying to make it become a hook. But I guess that's what all entertainment is. Trying to get a hook. What is it? And then Kofsky says, what is the meaning of that prune and vegetable symbolism? Or is it just nonsense? Zappa says, data dynamite. Now, in his autobiography, 12 years later, he says he didn't know about data art. He didn't know he was doing data until he was told. I wondered when he was told. Well, he was told in 67 at least, because he's using a term which he says he didn't know before. So he must have learned it while doing it at Garrick Theater. So he goes, data dynamite. You know, if you try and respond to that, like try and tune into that and respond to it like you would ordinary images, that would have the effect, if you let that grab you, move you around the way it's supposed to, it'd jerk you apart. Try and tune into that and flow with it. He quotes the album, Moonbeam Through the Prune, and tune into that and flow. Then, quote, the Magic Go-Kart. So he's saying you get data dynamite. If you try and respond to that, like try and tune into that and respond to it like you would ordinary images, that would have the effect, if you let that grab you and move you around the way it's supposed to, it'd jerk you apart. So he's making a joke about having people tune into the moonbeam through the prune. Try and tune into that and flow with it. Now, in Life magazine in June 68, he's talking about, he comes up in interviews, interrupts the dancer, and he also talks about everybody's trying to tune into their God, and he's trying to interrupt the tuning. So there's Frank as any environment. Try and tune into that and flow with it. Moonbeam through the prune. And tune into that and flow with the Magic Go-Kart. Minkowski says, I asked you this before, and I don't think I got a definite answer. Do you think you could have put this material out 5 or 6 years ago and have gotten the same response? Zappa says, I don't think we could have 5 or 6 years ago, but let me tell you something. I've got tapes of original versions of a lot of these songs, which were recorded 5 or 6 years ago when I had my studio. We have since refurbished and tried to bring them up to date in the current rhythmic formats and things like that. Like there was a time when shuffles were popular, but they're not exactly in vogue now. Popular rhythms change, which is an interesting study in itself. Figure ground. Popular rhythms change, which is an interesting study. That's what McLuhan studied, the figure ground of changes in rhythms, and tried to explain it. Is Roxy still on? Let's check this. Okay. Popular rhythms change, which is an interesting study in itself. That's like him listening in 200 Motels. He's Ringo Starr listening to the radio, listening to the pop music, and then writing it down. But that's actually what he does. He does take popular rhythms, studies it, and plays it back as a subplot in his work. Popular rhythms change, which is an interesting study in itself. Also, the use of parallel fifths is coming back, and the use of flatted fifths in a blues guitar line, which was gone for years. All guitar heard on top 40 records. What is this? All guitar heard on top 40 records were very sterile white notes. Bend a third and a bullshit chord. Maybe hit a sixth in there once in a while. But now they're getting back to that distorted nastiness that you hear on old blues records. Kosky says, you do a lot of that on those short breaks. You do a lot of that on those short breaks. Zappa. Because my whole guitar playing background is not jazz. I can't play jazz. We're the shit and never would claim to. That's why that jazz guy, Tommy Tedesco in the Wrecking Crew, he tells a story. One of the jazz giants getting together with Frank, and I guess they were playing jazz. Oh, yeah. And he couldn't believe how bad Frank was. So that's Frank's admitting that here. Because my whole guitar playing background is not jazz. I can't play jazz with the shit, and I never would claim to. What is your musical background? Self-taught, listen to records. But you listen to everything? You seem to have an encyclopedic knowledge. And Zappa says, and I remember what I hate. He remembers what he hates. And Kosky says, how did you get into music at all? I was playing since I was 15. In rock bands? Yes, I started out playing drums and sang Gabriel, California, in a band called the Ramblers. Kosky, why didn't you go directly into music? Why didn't you go directly into music? Why did you go into advertising? Well, I was married for 5 years, and I was an 8-to-5er. But I was more than an 8-to-5er because during the time I was doing that, I was also working in what you might call a tiptoe through the tulips type band, wearing a white tuxedo coat, which I still got, black pants, black patent leather shoes, hair slicked back, choreography, played 3 twist numbers a night, and the rest of the stuff was, oh, how we danced on that night. So that means he had to be a crummy lounge band. So he was doing that at night while doing advertising. So then, Kosky says, you condensed that experience beautifully on America Drinks and Goes Home. Zappa says, because a lot of the guys in the group have gone through that shit. You did that. And Kosky says, you did that. I cried when I heard that. Kosky admits that he cried when he heard the satire of life in a lounge band. Wow. Zappa says, did you get that... you cried. The Zappa says, did you get that guy swinging back and forth in front of the microphone like they do? Did you get that guy swinging back and forth in front of the microphone like they do? Kosky, oh yeah. Got the cash register, the glasses, the drunken voices, the piano arpeggios, the shuffle rhythm on the drums. It's all there, which is one of the reasons why jazz musicians don't want to play whiskey clubs anymore. And the audience doesn't understand it. You know, like, quote, we pay those niggers. Why don't they want to go and be slaves anymore? So the jazz musicians are not taking it anymore. Black Caucus, that's happening because when I showed up in '66, me and Carolyn, we freed the Black Caucus. And the audience doesn't understand it. Says Frank Kosky, you know, like, quote, we pay those niggers. Why don't they want to go and be slaves anymore? And Zappa says, yeah, quote, if you won't play, shine my shoes, goddammit, unquote. Kosky, precisely. Zappa says, the one thing that I think is really good about our music is that the setting for the lyrics are so carefully designed. Supposing you had to listen to America Drinks and Goes Home for 1,000,000 times, it would drive you crazy for one thing. But eventually, if you're the average stupid layman who hates music anyway, you might realize how perfect that setting is. Those words, man, those things, what's going on? You banging stuff?
No, I just sneezed. A ghost or two came into me.
Okay. All right. But eventually, if you're the average stupid layman who hates music anyway, you might realize how perfect that setting is. Those words, man, those things are so carefully constructed that it breaks my heart when people don't dig into them and see all the levels that I put into them. Kosky says, that ballad on America Drinks and Goes Home, I hear Tommy Dorsey playing Getting Sentimental or something like that every time it comes on. It's kind of the prototype of all modern sentimental crap Tin Pan Alley songs. Zappa says, because it was written based on the same subconscious formula that all those pukers use, here's his Who Are the Brain Police talk. You getting this? Subconscious formula that all those pukers use. Yeah. You know, 2-5-1 chord progressions, modulating all the way around. They modulate normally in a regular song in a circle of fifths, but this changes key and modulates, and it gets weird. There is something happening in all those changes. And the melody, if you just were to play the melody as a straight thing, it's an interesting tune. But those stupid words, and in that setting, with the cash registers and all that, we spent hours putting that together. Herbie, that's Herbie Cohen, manager of the Mothers Invention, was playing the cash register. We rehearsed the crowd noises. The talk track itself, which is underplayed in there, is funny because they're saying things like, quote, I got a new Mustang. Laughter. Frank laughs at that. And like the girls are saying, quote, Sally, will you go with me to the bathroom? Unquote. You know, that kind of stuff. And Kosky says, is that all in the libretto? Zappa says, you can't hear it on the record. Kosky says, I know you can't, but it's great. It's hysterical. You hear all those drunks, man. You just want to go in there and kill them all. You hear all those drunks, man. You just want to go in there. I mean, Frank Kosky's getting all, his Marxist self is getting all worked up by Frank. Frank's leading him on. What's he mean? He likes this stuff. I got a new Mustang. Sally, will you go with me to the bathroom? But he says you can't hear it. So how can we appreciate it? Is it in the libretto?
Well, because he was creating this background cocktail party noise, but he knew what
he told them to say. Yeah, he got them to say it. He knows he meant it, but it doesn't come through in the recording. You get drowned out with all the other stuff, all the drunks that Frank Kosky wants to kill. So, Zappa. But that's not all that's happening. Technology is not up to reproducing that one song. There he is. That's what Ian said. That Zappa could make stuff that technology couldn't reproduce. We can now hear what Frank was doing if they released it. We got the equipment, the improvement to hear his multi-layered embedment. I guess that's what he means. But that's not all that's happening. Technology's not up to reproducing that one song. I'll tell you what's in it. You've got the song itself and the tune, which is a parody of all the changes. You've got the lyrics, which is a parody of all the lyrics. You got the vocal performance of the lyrics, which is a parody of that. You've got the improvised dialogue, which is a parody of everybody's closing bullshit. It's a super manipulative. Kosky, I know. That's what's so pathetic. Zappa says, you've got the sound of the setting of the glasses and the cash register, which is right in there. You've got the crowd mumble, which was carefully programmed, like choreographed. Then on top of that, which you can't even hear, there's a fight going on. I sort of heard a fight. We had the crowd separated in two rooms. In the main studio, we had 10 people sitting around the microphone doing these lines on cue, with the cash register over here and the glass on one microphone, so you can see Frank directing it with his hand signals. Then in a vocal booth off to the side, what?
This is very interesting because this is what Paulino Oliveros calls the quantum hearing.
Right.
And you can see how Frank is aware of all the noises happening at the same time in an environment. Wherever he is, he might be listening to all these details, all these levels, all these tracks. And it's very interesting how he reproduces this cocktail party or this piano bar thing.
Right.
And the complexity he goes into to recreate this drinking environment.
Yeah, he's got tremendous ears, which is what his son said. Then, in a vocal booth off to the side, we had Ray and Jimmy Carl Black and Roy Estrada going through this number. We had Bunk Gardner trying to pick up two girls, quote, what's a girl like you doing in a place like this, unquote. All that stuff. And then Jimmy Carl Black's and Okie wanting to beat up a Mexican, who is Ray. There's the Mexican theme there. Yay! It's a good country to be princess of. You've made it into the Zappa landscape. And then Jim Zanoki wanted to beat up a Mexican, and who is Ray. They start out as good buddies, and they're drinking beer together, and find out the Indian, that's Jimmy Carl Black, who was an Indian, accuses the Mexican of going out with his wife, and they punch it out. And meanwhile, you actually, I think, see that kind of fighting in the movie 200 Motels later. I think they have a riot in the bar with Jimmy Carl Black. And meanwhile, the chicks tell this other guy to fuck off because he's coming on too strong, Quote, what kind of girls do you think we are? Unquote. And it's all happening in there, but you can't listen to it all. You've got to have it on 10 tracks so you can walk around the room and see where it's all coming from. That's what he later would do. Try it with, quadro, whatever that stuff was called in the 70s, quadro.
No, that's more like surround.
Yes, surround.
And distributing the sound with many different tracks and different speakers.
Yes.
So I think you have this impression of a real environment. It's not like the sound is coming only from two speakers. You put them in different parts of the room.
Yeah, acoustic hologram. Now, remember when we read Hunch and Toot, he describes, in detail the making of that quadraphonic thing. Well, I think they said quadraphonics was 4 speakers. So he was trying to develop that, and he was thinking about it in '67, and then he does it 5 years later in installations which didn't happen. He was trying to do it, but it didn't happen.
It is very interesting because he's not only thinking about the recording, but also on the reproduction, how it's going to be heard and put into the space.
Right, and that's McLuhan-esque. He's making a tetrad. He's making the hologramic, the environment as a surround. McLuhan talked a lot about that electric media surrounds you. So he says you've got to have it on 10 tracks so you can walk around the room and see where it's all coming from. Klosky, it must take hours to do that, not to say anything of recording costs. Zappa said, well, the cost of the second album was maybe a third of what Freakout was, $21,000. Klosky goes, $21,000? Zappa says, that's right. That's a heck of an investment for an unknown group. See, he was so lucky that it was all predestined. The good Lord demanded a fucking anti-environment, and Frank was going to happen whether you liked it or not. If there wasn't a Frank, you'd have to invent him. Right? You get my drift?
Yeah, no. He was meant to be.
Right. I think Bert's been out of action. Are you back, Bert? Anything
yes,
you want to say?
Now.
You want to say anything? We're coming to the final stretch here.
He did 10 tracks. It was a 10-track.
Yes.
Can you explain that? I just heard. I came in right when you were talking about he did 10 tracks, and you could walk around the room and see where the source.
Yes, like usually you record each instrument in a track, like voice, percussion. Maybe percussion can have more than one track, like different mics. Maybe, for example, the piano sometimes have also two. But, for example, guitars or bass have only one track. But he's making this environment of the bar, the cocktail party, and for that he used 10 different tracks of voices, the glasses, all the environmental noises you hear in a bar, and he made 10 tracks just of that environmental noise. And he was planning to distribute this with 10 speakers so that it will create the impression of a real bar.
Wow. So is that the reference that he created music that was not meant to be heard until now? Because that's unheard of back in the 60s. I mean, unless, like he did, he set up with 10 speakers. But now we have that all the time. Is that correct, how they now record music, Roxana, that they would have 10 tracks now, at least?
Yes, or more.
Or more,
Much more.
Okay. Wow.
Yes, and you have also like speakers that are like trees, for example, that you don't have only the stereo system, but there are new types of speakers that have many small speakers that you can direct to different directions. So you have this type of trees, and many composers use, for example, Stockhausen used that a lot, and François Bell. And you can have different speakers in the room, and according to which speaker you approach, it's how you sort of do the mixing as you move in the room. Like you may like to hear more this speaker or this instrument, and you go to that speaker, or then you want to listen to another noise, and you move in the room. And it's like you are swimming in the sound.
Is that the that soundboard? Is that their connection with like in concerts they have that soundboard? Is that what you're saying? That's already programmed into like a CD? That different sound, or are you talking about something different?
Well, you can have a recording and a mixer.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, there is this French composer, François Bell. He will do the mixing live, and that will be the way he will perform his music, by mixing it live. And he will have maybe 80 channels, or I don't know. It's amazing mixers.
Wow.
And he will distribute different speakers in the room, so you could have the effects of the panning or things coming from behind or from the front or from the sides. So it's like a virtual frequency dance that is surrounding you, all these sounds. And Zappa was already thinking about that, how to do that.
Yeah, I sense that when I hear his music. I was telling Bob last week, and I wanted to ask you that. Does he mix? That answers my question. Because it seems like when you listen to Zappa's music, there's a lot more. I don't want to use a kind of a, not to use the word crammed. He puts a lot into his compositions. When you hear it, there's a lot more going on in the foreground and the background as music. Is that like a mix of what you're speaking of these tracks?
Yes, because he had like different levels of, for example, he had the recording of the song in studio, or then the recording of the song in a concert with the noises of the audience. Then he could mix that, like this solo from this and the singer from that, or he will even mix other songs that are not the same song. And then he will transcribe things that were improvised. And he will give these things to different musicians that will play them. Then it's a solo that was improvised, but then they're playing it by reading it or learning it. So that it sounds like it's an improvisation, but it's being played by different people at the same time, so that would create a very interesting effect. So he was making all types of mixing, a lot of work in the recording studio, effects, and then with the synclavier also too, with sampling and experimenting with the tempos. The thing that amazed me the most is this tempo, this jumping, like he said. The thing he's doing is really hard to do and very complex, what he's doing with the rhythm. And like he puts a lot of ideas in just one song. And sometimes you're listening to these very funny, stupid songs, and behind it's amazing what's going on. And,
that's...
On this case, he's only explaining the background noise, the soundtrack that he's recreating. And it's already 10 tracks of things, and he knows exactly who is saying what and what is happening. And he's composing with all these noises. So that's why I say you can have an idea how he heard this quantum hearing. He was really hearing all these small elements that are there, and usually it's like with what you see. Usually we concentrate in one thing or in one track. Usually people follow the voice or the melodies, or some people like to follow the percussions or the bass lines.
Right. Yeah.
But people don't hear like the whole, like a conductor. They hear all these instruments, all these tracks, all this tuning. And they can read all these parallel lines of music. Like, for example, one pianist reads 2 lines at the same time, but the conductors, they have like a more panoramic view, and they can read at the same time more lines of melodies, of music, of rhythm. And they are hearing it also. So it's amazing because it gives me an idea of what he liked about Paulino Rivera, this concept of the quantum hearing, that you can go into listening to it and explore it and be fascinated with all the things that are happening. It's like a soundtrack, like composition.
Do you find that your hearing's changed since you've been on the RNA drops?
Yes.
Do you hear music differently now? Because Bob and I were talking about that last week, and I was telling him that I hear music differently, all music. I hear, just like what you were saying, the panoramic, not as fine detail, but I just noticed that songs that I used to listen to, that I listen to now, the sound is more profound, or I can hear more. And that's what I asked about. It seemed like Zappa puts a lot more, because his music, when I listen to it, it has a richer effect on my hearing. I hear a lot more than normal, songs that I've listened to. So that's
for example, I don't have the patience to hear. The other day somebody was playing the Beatles at work, and after 3 songs I was like, God, how boring. It's like, again 4 beats. And la 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 la. It's like, oh God, this is so boring. Can you play something more complex?
Yeah, it's something with the beat. But I also find that also after from listening to Bob, live on Payday, and then all the Iron clips, and then CKLN days. If I just listen to a news person or something, I'm automatically, after about 3 minutes to listen to them, it's not interesting. I don't know what it is, but it's just something that's not appealing to listen, because it's sort of like the words. It's like what you're saying about the 4 beats in the music. It's just like when you hear another person speaking, it's not appealing to listen to for some reason.
The patterns are also...
Yeah, patterns. There you go. Yes. The
ideas are... Yes, sir. It's the weather. It's not pattern recognition. It's not pattern management.
Well, the patterns are very small. Ones that, we're being introduced to larger patterns. So when you hear the smaller patterns that are within the big patterns, it's sort of like old news, although it's new for others, maybe. One way to look at it.
Yes, and then there is another phenomenon, like, for example, I was reading about the figure underground, because I was reading about why McLuhan would study the Logos, and why he went to study media ecology.
Mm-hmm.
And I understood that for him, grammar was like the basic art, and it's very, very important to understand language and words, to understand what you are and the environment. What is reality? What is this frequencies I is talking about? And then this thing happened with the portrait of the king, that the king is the figure and the ground is this fabric behind him. And it's sort of very interesting how somehow what I was, the concepts I had then become the percepts. The perception sort of also gets this idea of figure and ground.
Yes.
And I'm watching this portrait. So that's another thing that I see, that really the perception starts changing, and how you connect and how you make pattern recognition.
Yes.
Like that's
I noticed that in the
whole story of Charbon.
Yeah, speaking of the perceptions, because I looked at maybe 6 different YouTubes of Chumboard, and I saw something different each time. Each time I saw, sometimes it would be an aerial view and it would come in and you go around. You would see so many different, that's really special architecture. There's harmony, but then you also see vortexes, the angles. There are some windows in that castle that look just like the chromosome 14 in the middle of the angel diagram. It's each time I saw it, I saw something different. And also, did you ever see the picture of the castle with the reflecting pool, and then you would have the flip side in the water? Have you ever seen that picture? That's That's amazing, because you see words and every time I looked at a video, I saw something. It's amazing. It's really amazing.
But that's the thing that also I found very interesting. This thing about the mirrors, the reflection, the replay, and how all media and language is trying to mirror to recreate, and then you ask yourself, what is real reality? How do you know you're not looking at the reflection? How do you know this is the real? And all these things people were trying to understand about men being created similar to God, and how we are recreating this media to replay the reality, to imitate. And you see that in the castle, to this thing about the mirror, the parallel world.
Yeah. I mean, it's just amazing how you found that, really. Just looking at some monsters, and then all of a sudden you find this monster of a castle that has a lot of symbolic.
Gave it to me. I think it's an ironic joke, because he said several times that Godzilla is coming, and then this salamander actually looks like a Godzilla with a crown.
Yeah.
Doesn't look like a salamander.
I heard one
Bert,
tape that said they have
Bert.
Yeah.
Bert.
Yeah.
I just want to say that in talking to Ian today about the castle, I brought up the fact that Roxy's very aware of the past year of you guiding her, and they went, "Oh yeah." So they confirmed that what Roxy suspected is happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, you were going to say something.
I always say, it's not me, it's them, really. It's like I have the impression they want these things put out, because many things I don't know myself, and I just all of a sudden know them.
Yeah.
So you were going to say something.
No, I listened to there was some in English, but then there was some in German, and I heard one in German that there are 77, I want to ask Roxana, did you hear like 77 different stairwells in that castle? Is that correct? 77? Or I heard something different?
No, I'm not sure, but I have seen that all the numbers of all the things have a meaning, because, for example, the 8 is related to thoughts and eternity. Yeah. And this king built 11 castles, and all the measurements of the squares and the divisions, they're all like they were some squares with the alphabets and letters that were used to give some occult messages. And it's like they use this type of patterns in the building, so that people who knew this code can understand. Yeah. Some people say it's like a ship Like they can build words that in French says navire, like a ship.
Yeah.
Is that German? Ship.
Yeah, ship. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, that was a very keen observation that you had, that the stone, the white stone and the magnesium. It's amazing. It's amazing find.
Yes, and usually, for example, when they sculpt in that stone, they use tools for wood because it's so soft.
Yeah. Also, for me, it's a similar mystery of how the pyramids were built, but also how that castle was built, and how they transported all that stone to create, to finish that, because it's not like they had a Lastwagon or, big trucks to move the stone into that location, that remote location, so it's a big mystery.
Well, they say they did it with through water and wagons, but they used 220,000 blocks.
Yeah.
So all the numbers are like, for example, they have 40 rooms. And it's like all the numbers are also very important. Like they were saying things with everything.
Yeah.
And, I suppose Bob already asked Kion.
Yeah. I mean, there was another clue also that you're saying the numbers is something that stuck out with me, is I heard that, I think it was, I heard Bob say it, and maybe Bob was repeating what I heard from you, is that the king only visited her 9 times, 9 gates. It's amazing when you hear the numbers.
Not only Frank the First, but also the Sun King. He was also 9 times. And actually, Ion said I should see the 9 Gates, the movie. And I saw it before, but now I have to see it again. But I was watching all these engravings that are supposed to be in those books. And I was looking at the images and the symbols that are in there.
Yeah,
and it's very
I also want to watch that movie again, The 9 Gates, because I saw it before this, but now it's more interesting to go back and look for the designs. Because didn't you, earlier when I first came on, you were talking about the 2 dogs. Isn't that a design in one of those, in the books, in the book in The 9 Gates? There's 2 dogs fighting, or 2 dogs. Is that what you were referring to earlier?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I saw the picture when you said it. Yeah.
Hey, Bert, it's the 9th gate. It's singular. The 9th gate.
Okay.
It's the name of the movie.
9th gate. Okay, 9th gate. Okay.
Yeah. And
thanks,
you said you got some of that video on Chambord in English?
Yes. There was, but it wasn't. Go ahead.
It may not play over here. I tried to open one that Roxy said, but North America, Europe, the divide. So you might have access to stuff we can't see here. Oh no, yeah, you're in Switzerland.
Yeah.
So you have. So, anyways, it's quite amazing what's going on there. A couple of points you made I could elaborate, but Ian said for some reason don't tell anybody this stuff right now. But it's quite in a way, it's way more going on there than what we thought a few days ago.
Yeah. It's quite clear every time I see. Like I told Roxana, every time I see it, I see something different. I'm like, this is kind of amazing.
Yes, and I was telling Bob, I want to go. And
yeah, I do too.
Don't go. He just said, don't go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why?
That's the main message for you. There was something what we just, was it something of backlog, something about Zappa.
The
so he's doing the choreography.
I took it off track when we talked about 10 tracks, and that's how we did it.
See, that's what happened. He went to Paul Buff's studio in 62 or so and studied under Buff or learned from him. But Buff had one of the most advanced studios in the world, if not the most advanced. Some of the surfing hits were recorded there, but he had like 4, 5, 6 track, which people didn't have. So Frank very early apprenticed at a very advanced multi-track place.
Wow.
I mean, the guy's supposed to go to school, or they want him to go to university, or do this or that. He found his university anyways. Couldn't stop him. You know, he found where he should go, which was this great studio. It was there for him to have if he found it, and he allowed himself to experience it, rather than staying in a college music class situation. He's lucky to have had that advantage.
And you say he had this exposure in 1962? Buff?
Yeah, he met Paul Buff. He didn't buy the studio till August '64, but he meets Paul Buff and hangs out at the studio for a few years, 2 or 3 years, and he made a few records. Paul Buff was known, and I don't know, "Bird's a Word" or one of those famous songs was recorded in Paul Buff's studio. And, you know, I overload you with facts, but now it would have new resonance. Remember, when Carol's in that New York book in 1999, she has a T-shirt on and it says, "I know Paul Buff personally." Now you know who we're talking about. Now you see the humor of that T-shirt. I mean, he's an important person. He went on to be a big deal in Nashville. And, you know, Frank bought the studio in August '64. In less than a year, it was torn down. He was kicked out of it. They wouldn't let him take his props, his movie props. They ran him off to jail. He got out of jail after 10 days and got out of that town. And I heard that about a year later they widened the street and knocked the studio down, but Frank says they knocked it down earlier, so I don't know when it actually got knocked down, but it was gone. And then you go look at our movie. We're filming where the building was. You look at our videotape of it. And it's more of a more modern building, but it's the same broad wall structure where it was. So they took it away from him. It was a drag for him, but then it got him to L.A. Look at that. He gets to L.A., and everything's going to happen within a few months after he gets to L.A. He's lucky he got there, you know, spring, summer '65, because everything was open. The Doors and Arthur Lee and Love, they all was just starting to surface, and the Byrds. If he didn't catch that wave, we wouldn't have the wonderful world we have today.
It's like in the song of the Stairway to Heaven. Diane says, "This woman gets what she wants, even if the store is closed." And it's like Zappa. You can manifest what you need, no matter what.
And what did you say? Some woman? I didn't get what you're referring to.
Well, the woman with the gold.
The gold lame in Stairway to Heaven, right? Yeah.
Okay, so she can get what she wants, even if the store is closed.
Okay, so let's just finish this. Just a bit left here. So Frank got a lot of money to make Freak Out, $21,000. And as Frank says, that's a heck of an investment for an unknown group. But that's what Tom Wilson did, and Tom Wilson should be put in a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for helping Frank. So Kofsky says, for 2 LPs, that's about 5 times what it would take for a jazz group. Zappa says, we really had a good budget for that, which has not been offered to us since, because at the time we recorded the second album, the sales had dipped on Freak Out. He found out years later that the Mafia or somebody took all the albums and dumped them in a warehouse. They weren't distributed properly. somebody didn't want them out there. So, Lenkowski says, I meant to ask you earlier when we were talking about your singles, how has the album done overall? Have you seen an audit on that? Zeph says, sure. I'll tell you very happily that the first album is around 150,000 right now, and they project sales of 250,000 for the second album by August. And Freak Out still sells regularly between 2,000 and 8,000 copies a week, every week, in places like Montana, Wyoming, Florida, Virginia, and all those places, man. I know it's one of the top sellers in the record store in what passes for a campus area in Pittsburgh. See, that must be where Klopsky teaches, in Pittsburgh. He hates Pittsburgh. He puts it down again. I know it's one of the top sellers in the record store in what passes for a campus area in Pittsburgh. Zappa says, well, you see, it doesn't stop. It's the kind of a thing where somebody can hear it at a party and they'll remember the name of it. Klopsky says, some of my students at Carnegie Tech turned me on to it, and the Andy Warhol album at the same time. I think that's Velvet Underground. Zappa says, I like that album. I think that Tom Wilson deserves a lot of credit for making that album because it's folk music. It's electric folk music in the sense that what they're saying comes right out of their environment. Klopsky says, it's folk in the sense of relating to a milieu. Zappa, Love, Arthur Lee's Love is that kind of group too because what they sing about is the folk music of the L.A. freak. What we sing about is the folk music of our environment from Pomona to L.A. You know, being kicked around in go-go bars and like that. Klopsky says, you're older too, I think. Zappa says, our average age in the Mother's Invention is 30. The age range is 24 to 35. That's in 1967. So he's saying that Love was more focused on the L.A. freak scene, the Love band, but what we sing about is the folk music of our environment from Pomona to L.A. So it's more of the, ass-kicker bars or something. He thinks is where his music comes out of or represents. He says, being kicked around in go-go bars and like that. So it ends with the age of these guys. They're a bunch of old men infiltrating the youth industry. So, isn't that neat? Now,
yes,
we need to play Civilization Phase 3, or listen to some of this shit and analyze it.
Yeah,
got to analyze some of this.
Right.
So,
we are ready for that trick.
Right. Did you say that church or trick? What'd you say?
Trip. But
trip, yeah,
church.
that trip. Right, so that was very good what you guys were talking about. That was good to get that on recording.
It's important, I think, just to repeat that McLuhan and Zappa are sort of trying to motivate, inspire the people to see both the figure and the ground.
Yeah.
Not only the figure, not only the main talk in the mainstream broadcast, but to go and explore the environment and see more ground. Make your own patterns.
It sounds like Ian was on a destructive trip. Kyle writes in, Ian blew up my cell phone. When I call someone, he says, when I call someone, the phone rings. On phones, usually they can't write a fucking sentence. I don't know what he's saying, but somebody's phone rings on his phone, and there's no sound. So that's what I'm getting. Maybe that's it. Maybe the thing is ringing, but we don't hear it. I don't know. Anyways, Kyle, maybe Aya is so fucking powerful now. If we go near him, your phones blow up. Bill's phone blows up.
No, maybe they want to be here, but for some reason their frequency is so strong that.
Yeah. So, how do I do this? You sent me Civilization Phase 3, didn't you? A YouTube that had them all, or what was that?
Yes, there is a playlist with Civilization.
Right.
If you go to YouTube, I suppose you just write playlist.
Well, I was thinking that I'd read the dialogues to see if there's anything in them. I've got a printout. It came with the album.
Cool.
Yeah, we don't need to hear the music part. We're not interested in the music. We're interested in genius. Music's a dime a dozen, right? Everybody's got music.
Yes, we need to analyze the logos.
Yes, we're analyzing the logos. So
the grammar.
Okay, I'll read what Frank wrote. You know what this booklet says. So it says, he's talking about the set as if it was performed, the environment of the people in the. I might as well read it all. General notes. In 1967, we spent about 4 months recording various projects. Uncle Meat, We're Only for the Money, Ruben and the Jets, and Lumpy Gravy at Apostolic Studios, 53 East 10th Street, New York City. One day I decided to stuff a pair of U-87s in the piano, cover it with a heavy drape, put a sandbag on the sustain pedal, and invited anybody in the vicinity to stick their head inside and ramble incoherently about the various topics I would suggest to them via the studio talkback system. This setup remained in place for several days. During that time, many hours of recordings were made, most of it useless. Some of the people who took the challenge included Spider Barber, leader of the rock group Chrysalis, which was also recording at Apostolic when we weren't booked in, All Night John, who was the studio manager, Gilly Townley, sister of the guy who owned the studio, Monica, the receptionist, Roy Estrada and Motorhead Sherwood, members of the Mothers of Invention, Louis Cuneo, a guy who used to come to our live shows at the Garrick Theater and laugh like a psychotic turkey, and a few other people. Some of this dialogue, after extensive editing, found its way into the Lumpy Gravy album. The rest of it sat in my tape vault for decades, waiting for the glorious day when audio science would develop tools which might allow for its resurrection. In Lumpy Gravy, the spoken material was intercut with sound effects, electronic textures, and orchestral recordings of short pieces recorded at Capitol Studios, Hollywood, autumn 1966. These were all 2-track razor blade edits. The process took about 9 months. Because all the dialogue had been recorded in, to borrow a phrase from Evelyn, a modified dog, that's a composition he did. Because all the dialogue had been recorded in, and to borrow a phrase from Evelyn, a modified dog, in panchromatic resonance and other highly ambient domains, that's all in quotes, it was not always possible to make certain edits sound convincing, since the ambience would vanish disturbingly at the edit point. This severely limited my ability to create the illusion that various groups of speakers recorded on different days were talking to each other. As a result, what emerged from the text was a vague plot regarding pigs and ponies threatening the lives of characters who inhabit a large piano. Now, that was all Lumpy Gravy. In Civilization Phase 3, we get a few more clues about the lives of the piano dwellers and note that the external evils have only gotten worse since we first met them. The bulk of the musical material comes from synclavier sequences, all music in Act 1. In the second act, the music is a combination of synclavier, 70%, and live performance, 30%, along with a new generation of piano people. The new residents, he lists them, My Daughter Moon Unit, actor Michael Rappaport, the music preparation assistant for the Yellow Shark Project, that would be at Frankfurt, 92, Ali N. Askin, my computer assistant, Toddy Vega, and the entire brass section of the Ensemble Moderne. All these people were recorded in a Bosendorfer Imperial at UMRK, that's Utility Muffin Research Kitchen, his studio, during the summer of 1991. By this time, digital editing technology had solved the ambience hangover problem, finally making it possible to combine their fantasies in a more coherent way with the original recordings from 1967. So then it says, scenario. Civilization Phase 3 is an opera pantomime. opera-pantomime, with choreographed physical activity, in brackets, manifested as dance or other forms of inexplicable socio-physical communication, in the bracket. Plot continuity is derived from a serial rotation of randomly chosen words, phrases, and concepts. Plot continuity is derived from a serial rotation of randomly chosen words, phrases, and concepts, including, but not limited to, motors, pigs, ponies, dark water, nationalism, smoke, music, beer, and various forms of personal isolation. All voices and music are pre-recorded.
I have to interrupt. I have to interrupt because I think what you did today is also an opera pantomime with choreographed physical activity.
Yes, and you had to be there, Bert. It was not recorded, unless someone recorded it off the air somehow, but you have to be there.
Oh, wow.
I recorded.
Oh, you did? You recorded?
All but yes, some.
Wow. I don't know if I want to look at it, but...
no, but maybe I'll insert it in the Eric McLuhan synesthesia video.
The Eric McLuhan video? What's that?
Yeah, your review of his book. Oh,
yeah. No, actually, that's good. You can use little fragments of it in our videos, right?
Yes.
Yeah, the good stuff where I look real good. Don't do the bad stuff. I mean, I have no idea how it came across.
No, your air guitar solos are amazing.
My what?
Air guitar solos.
Air, oh, you like that? Yay! Yeah. I'm very proud of my air guitaring. Yeah. Hey, that's good. But Bill didn't want to record it because it'll just pile up on his website, so we don't want to bother him with that. But if other people record it, it might be interesting. It's a new kind of aristocratic operatic pantomime. Did you see when I would sit down on the couch and lean back on the couch? Did you like that move? I was proud of that one.
You have a very risky move with your legs up on the air.
Yeah, bouncing my legs, my feet.
So this is
did you start laughing at different points?
Yes.
You were laughing. Good. We do want people to have a good time. Well, Carol said,
it's you cannot know what's going to happen next. It's like you disappear.
Yes.
And then you come back and whatever, then you disappear.
And I saunter through again like I'm not even listening. You're just walking around. I was smoking a cigarette. Where am I? Is this a bus station? Where am I?
So this is going to be the greatest dance of all time, part 2?
Yes, this is the greatest dance, part 2. But could you tell, Roxy, that I was looking over at Carolyn? Could you tell by my eyes, the way I was looking, that I was looking at somebody occasionally? You couldn't. Because Carolyn was standing off to the side, standing there with her arm under, like the teacher, the school teacher. She had her fist on her waist and sitting there looking at me, from her point of view, making a complete fool of myself. And she likes my dancing, but she just thought, Bob, what are you doing? You're just leaping about. So, yes, you were saying something?
Yes, it's a different type of replay because it's like the new generations, nobody wants to learn to play an instrument. They want to be famous DJs.
So I might have hit on how to become famous. Just start dancing to the crap, to the shit. The shit that piles up, I'll just start dancing to it. Piles of shit. Bob dances on top of pile of shit. But, yeah. Okay, so let's continue here. What did I read? Okay. All voices and music are pre-recorded, and to the extent possible, all scenic and lighting changes will be automated, with their cues stored as digital code on a track embedded in the audio master. Then he lists the people. There's the piano people are made up of Spider, John, Frank Zappa, Motorhead. Well, he doesn't have Frank Zappa, he just has FZ. Motorhead, Larry, Roy, Lewis, Monica, Gilly, Girl 1, Girl 2, Moon, Mike, Allie, Todd, Daryl, and Jesus. Jesus was on this. The speaking characters all wear oversized masks, gloves, and shoes. They live in an abstracted grand piano represented by crisscrossed layers of ropes and cables of various thicknesses, painted to resemble piano strings, cubistically interspersed with stylized resonators, hammers, and stretches of sounding board, surrounded by an ebony region suggesting the rim of the piano exterior. So he had made a set of a big piano that they're inside of. He says the set should be designed to move and reconfigure itself as the characters who live in different corners of the piano pantomime. No, the set should be designed to move. The set should be designed to move and reconfigure itself as the characters who live in different corners of the piano pantomime their dialogue, giving the illusion of viewing the action from several imaginary camera angles. There's the walking around the room kind of thing. Above the piano is a decrepit-looking megaphone apparatus which allows the Frank Zappa, or FZ, character to address the inmates periodically. So the decrepit-looking megaphone, there was the chrome-plated megaphone of Destiny was on We're Only for the Money. That was the name of a song. But he still got it there. Surrounding the piano are groups of movable tableau sets representing various aspects of the threatening exterior universe which has driven our characters to take shelter in this gigantic music box. Dance action occurs primarily in these areas. These should be on palettes or turntables, facilitating quick scene changes. The following is a rough breakdown of the proposed stage activity for each musical scene. I totally forgot that this was a fucking another play. This fits into our series. This comes after Hunching Tooth. No, after Thingfish. So this is to be read as a bunch of scenes. What do you think of that?
Yes, and I find it very interesting how he's also going away from the one point of view, the vanishing point of the
right.
printing book.
Yes.
The perspective of the printing book. He says the set must give the impression of many cameras, like the security cameras we have now everywhere.
Right.
All these different points of view, and that's sort of very visionary.
Yeah.
He saw this threatening environment and how the refuge is the frequency, is the bunker is the piano.
What's that? The bunker is the piano, did you say?
Yeah, like the bunker against all these threatening
exterior other
things
media
happening in the environment. Yeah.
Now here's the overlay with McLuhan. McLuhan pointed out that the piano was the ultimate Gutenberg instrument. Much, left hemisphere, fine precision, moving your hands. It's a totally left hemisphere technology. And so these people are living in the leftover, the meme of visual space, which is the economy and old forms of wealth measurement that don't apply anymore. So we're stuck in this old visual space box, and he's described it with the correct technology, a big piano. It's literally McLuhanism.
Yes, and we saw how the keyboard was invented by Bach when the electricity was appearing.
Yeah.
And now that is the end of this old environment, the electric environment. It's already like showing the ionic.
You have the new box.
This old environment.
Yeah. Like McLuhan makes a lot out of Ian Don Theo, that Pope's Dunciad was a great Menippean satire about the printing press, written in 1741-42. Well, that's when it came out. Then you have 200 years later, 1939, 1940, Phineas Wake comes out, and Phineas Wake completes what Alexander Pope did with the Dunciad. We got the same in music. We can start saying that Bach started it like Pope did, responding to the new potentials of the printed world, the print knowledge, and it ends with Phineas Wake, which is Zappa, who layers many tracks in there just like Phineas Wake has written. It's a total parallel, equal.
Wow. Yeah.
It's A.P. Alexander Pope and J.B. Bach. What's his initials? J.B.
Johann Sebastian?
Yeah, J.S.B. So you got A.P. and J.S.B. ending up with, for Pope, F.W. and music, F.Z. Frank Zappa. F.W. You could probably break down the W. See, that F is 6, so 6 and 23. W is the 23rd letter. Zappa is 6 and 26. Then you have J.S. Bach. You add make that 1, 19, 2, and Alexander Pope 1 and 16. I bet you could fuck around with it and make it equal equations.
Okay.
I'll leave it to some enthusiast. We'll see if Kingy will do it. Somebody will put it together. I mean, I can do it in 5 seconds, but I'm not going to do it right now. But I totally forgot that Civilization was a play. I mean, I haven't listened to this in years. I bought it 20 years ago, and 22 years ago, and here we are with it, looking at it. And it is so McLuhan-esque. Only I know this, right? I'm the only one who fucking knows about this. Eric might know it. But Eric's not listening to Zappa. I'm the fucking one doing the work, finding out what our culture means, Bert. Nobody fucking knows who did what.
You are doing the revelation.
The new revelations, that's right.
Of the scriptures.
The book of Scripture.
It's portraying this. We're in this transition of the end of this old environment and the coming of the new, and we're in this limbo.
What? An limbo?
Which is a piano.
What's that? An limbo?
Limbo.
Limbo.
Oh, limbo. And here's another thing. What you have is Alexander Pope. The great poets, they translate the guys before them. They cut their teeth on reading the greats, and then they produce a great thing. Well, I did the analysis of the greats, and now I produce the great new thing, Ion. That's what the great artists always are heavy homework doers. They translate things, they study, they promote things, do a lot of work, in the Gutenberg mode. That's what I did. So I naturally write the new poem because I fucking study the old shit.
Listen, you're always talking also of the box of the cold fusion.
Right.
The piano is now something else, and this is the new frequency.
Right.
But in the meantime, they're still there in this weird mechanism of strings and hammers and.
Yeah, strings and hammers. You said strings and hammers?
Yes, the inside of a piano.
And you don't do it for anybody. I study what I study because I wanted to. It gave me pleasure. So you create something new out of pleasure. Like Pope did what he did. Alexander Pope, because he enjoyed doing it. Joyce did what he did. Zappa did. You have to do it's the only way anything is ever done. You have to fucking be motivated or like it or be into it or be hypnotized by it or exercised. That's how. And so they spend all the time telling people to do this and that. It doesn't work. Education doesn't work. It can only come out of slack. A relax and allow situation. That's how great art is made.
Yes.
Yes, Frank Zappa always said he recorded and put out the things he liked, and if somebody else liked it, was a bonus. But
yeah, but it wasn't important, and he was trying to find out what it sounded like. You know, Zappa gets into that Paul Buff studio in 62, 63, and he then spent the next 30 years stuck. He just loved doing the editing. That's what he did for 30 years. Just sat in a studio and made these things. He couldn't stop doing the editing. Composing.
Yes, perfecting the replay.
And, you know, he actually had the most unique experience. It must be incredible to get out there on stage and play his kind of music with his kind of guitar ability. Can you imagine doing that, Bert? What a powerful experience that would be.
Yes. And each time different. I mean, he never tried to repeat. It's always different. Always different.
No, but I think you can have an idea of what it's like because you do that with speech. Like you can go and improvise and do your metal jazz and talk, and sometimes you go like.
And I don't notice it. Like Frank didn't notice how great he was. He just could do it, right? So he didn't sit around and marvel at it. He just did it. And I guess I sit around and talk up a storm and don't think much of it.
Yes, and sometimes you can go at different speeds. You can go also very fast.
Right.
And it's like you have to listen to what you were saying because it's like you go really like at different tempos, like jumping.
Which is a pale approximation of what Ian can do.
Yeah.
He did one of those rants on the Led Zeppelin song. Remember, he went on near the end. He went on this multiple rant about something.
It's true, but you have to have this ability to improvise with him.
Yes.
And to keep the conversation with him, because sometimes it's quite hard to follow them and to get all the things they're saying.
That's a good point. Like who played together? It's like Miles Davis and John Coltrane. Bob and Ion, the new Miles Davis-John Coltrane duo. That's what you're saying, right? Takes a talent to jam with Ion. The fucking guy, he fucking blew up my phone. And then Kyle got caught in the crossfire. You don't see people hanging around Bathar or any of those mediums on YouTube and say, well, the guy blew up my fucking phone. I can't run my radio show. And, it didn't get fixed till I played the song, and then Bill called me. He finally occurred to him, I can call Bob. It didn't get fixed until we played the song.
Listen, I was reading an article how, for example, music you like creates different chemistries in your brain that are pleasant.
Right.
And even though it's a type of abstract communication, it's affecting the chemistry, for example, of your brain.
Mm.
And talking, it must have the same effect.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's how Ion changes the world.
As you are
by
talking and playing, and you are also listening, it must have also this type of effect on the chemistries of the brain.
Well, Frank is
maybe
noticing.
Maybe that's why I said you're transformed after you speak with Ion.
I'm me or any of us?
Everybody.
Yeah, I agree.
Everybody
that does happen to people. You're not the same person. You're not the same person
you are
after
the one that has most hours with them.
Right. I'm the most mutated. I mean, Ian has said that I don't have a body chemistry like any other human anymore. I've been he said so many RNA drops that I've mutated. I'm fucking not human. I'm probably a fucking cobra snake or something in my body chemistry.
like today, you started dancing.
Well, that's a good point. Music. Maybe my dancing is communicating.
You had me talking non-stop for hours. I mean, that's not normal. I already had to take a big glass of coffee to keep up.
What did she say, Bert?
You said you have to take a big glass of coffee to
to be awake.
What did you say, Roxana?
To stay awake. To play with Bob.
Yeah.
But it just occurred to me, hey, maybe scientists will look at the video of me dancing. They can read what's going on in my body. Maybe there was an important point of me demonstrating myself so people can look at this fucking mutated body. How was I dancing? I probably don't even know how interesting my dancing was. Yeah, maybe there was an agenda. Ion said that Ion knew I was going to do this. So I was talking to him this morning. I hadn't told him. And he said, Bob, you're going to be celebrating. And he told me what we were celebrating. I mean, we're celebrating something right now. And that might have influenced me to decide to dance. But Ion said, definitely, it's time for you to dance, Bob. You're celebrating. So that's the good news. But I didn't feel, I just thought, hey, we got this camera, let's dance, let's just jump around a bit. I didn't think of it in terms of a massive press conference. Ian says it was a massive press conference. We announced our victory. And Bob didn't see it that way. Bob didn't know why he was doing it. He just did it because he felt like it. Because it could be done. But you know what? Why I did it? Is a couple of weeks ago.
Disco Boy.
Yeah, Disco Boy. A couple of weeks ago, I liked the songs. I started off with that early rock and roll, early jump music, they call it. No, the jump music, the more, whatever 40s barrel music, piano stuff. And I was dancing around. I said, hey, this would be fun to demonstrate my dancing ability. So I said, okay. So I bought the camera, I set it up, and I went back and played songs from a couple weeks ago. That's what I did. I added some other ones, but I replayed. I never repeat songs, but I did today just so I could get into the dancing vibe that I got into a couple of weeks ago. That was how I thought I was doing it. But, of course, there were larger other reasons why it was being done that my little chemical body brain had no clue about.
And it's like the butterfly effect that the wings of a butterfly can start.
Yes. And it was important to
this Disco Boy is provoking.
That's right. Now, here's the timeliness. We could have read Frank Kosky talking to Frank, months ago. We didn't do it till now, and I'd totally forgotten about it all, but it was about Zappa creating the chaos butterfly effect. He influenced the industry all across the board, and we got to read it tonight after I did it in the camera. See the perfect timing of it?
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know Frank talked about it that way. I had a memory of it. I knew he knew that he was significant and a big influence, but I didn't know he spelled it out in this interview like that. So it's if somebody reading that interview would say, this Frank's a megalomaniac, Frank Kosky got him talking about how he's influencing everything. That's like a Bob interview. And we end up Bob celebrating his great victory over humanity. Starts off as a simple interview. Now, Carolyn does that in medicine. She's always getting interviewed on these new summits. And some woman just is doing some theme, and here's Carolyn's some doctor that she'll talk to anybody. So they bring Carolyn in. Every fucking time, the person gets cured. They've got all kinds of health problems they don't even know they have. Carol starts talking, and they start saying, wait a minute, I've got that, blah, 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 blah. And they all get cured right there. Like she's curing people while they're supposed to be doing this topical interview.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
A lot of it, the woman said today, she's gone to like 200 doctors over the last 20 years or something with all these ridiculous problems. She said, I never learned as much in the hour you talked to me. I never heard anybody say anything you said, and it all makes sense. That was her big epiphany, after they talked for 2.5 hours. That's right. Carol wasn't even going to do a very long one. But this person got so many insights that they were flabbergasted. But they had gone for years to stupid regular therapists. Nothing accomplished. So here's what I want to do is read you the titles of the songs, if they're titled someplace, so we can get an overview of the themes. Look, song number 2, it's called Put a Motor in Yourself. Remember we were talking about that earlier? Now,
yes. Do your thing. That's right. How you do your thing.
Yeah, you do. You put a motor, do. So, okay, here's the list. Act 1. And most of these, a lot of them are in quotes. Quotation marks, like somebody saying it. So, there is 19 parts. That's Bob's number, 19. It is Act 1, 19 parts, 56 minutes and 11 seconds. 5 and 6 is 11, and 11 is 11, 22. You go over to Act 2, 22 sections. So you have Act 1 is 19 parts. Act 2 is 22. You put the two together, you get my birthday, 1922. Then, the Act 2, the time is 57:38. It's like a minute or plus longer than Act 1. 5 and 7 is 12. 3 and 8 is 11. You take the 11 and you make that 2, and you take the 1, 2 of 12, you get 122, which is a special 22. So symmetrically, Dobbstown up the yin-yang. So here are the titles. This is Phase 3. Put a motor in yourself. Oh, they made me eat it. Reagan at Bitburg. That was 1985. A very nice body. Navanax. Guess that's a drug. How the pig's music works. Xmas values or Christmas values. Dark water. Amnerica. A-M-N. Amnerica. Have you heard their band? Religious superstition. Saliva can only take so much. Buffalo voice. Someplace else right now. Get a life. A kayak, in brackets, on snow, which almost looks like ion snow, but it's a bracket. A kayak, in brackets, on snow. Now, it's alternate. You have a quote and then a non-quote. A quote, then a non-quote. And it alternates except for at 4 and 5, Reagan at Bitburg follows another non-quote. It basically alternates. So then you come into 19, and it's called N-light. That's almost like negative pH to me. N-light. 1, negative light. 2, Venice submerged. LaRouche did a whole anti-Venice thing, big LaRouchian theme that is. 3, the New World Order. 4, the lifestyle you deserve. 5, creationism. 6, he is risen. So that's the first 19 acts of Act 1. Act 2, again, no, not so alternating. More quotes than non-quoted. More quotes than thematic things. So here it goes. I wish Motorhead would come back. Secular humanism. Attack, attack, attack. I was in a drum. A different octave. This ain't CNN. The pig's music. A pig with wings. This is all wrong. Hot and putrid. Flowing inside out. I had a dream about that. Gross man. A tunnel into muck. Why not? That was the name of his company when he started developing Russia or offering assistance to Russia. Why not? Number 16, put a little motor in him. Put a little motor in him. E-M. You're just insulting me, aren't you? You're just insulting me, aren't you? Cold light generation. It's like Coldplay. Cold light generation. Dio-fa. That would be the end of that. Beat the Reaper. Waffenspiel. So what's Waffenspiel mean, Roxy? Waffenspiel.
Well, the waffle is like the waffle, and spiel is like a place, or like a game.
A game, okay. What's Waffen? This is Waffen. What is that?
Waffen.
Weapon.
Waffen is like guns.
Guns?
Weapon.
Oh, yeah, because it ends with guns. Yeah, they're